Center for Psychoanalysis and Culture. I'm welcoming all of you. Thank you for coming.
Also to take forward the conversation, actually, from Bose's philosophy of psychoanalysis. And I'm just thinking, you are very much into Marx, Livio, that where does the idea of stages come to us? So if Bose, if I may put him as a philosopher of the seesaw, Bose is always trying to find that point in the seesaw, and how do you get that balance in the seesaw, and what happens to us when we don't have that balance, when we tilt to one side, what happens to the other side, and as you move that balance in the seesaw, what would happen. And I'm approaching the same letters, not to any way do away with the stages. There are stages, no doubt about it, actually. But is there in Bose a constant seesaw, a constant, if I may put it this way, a double wish, that he has to get into a conversation with Freud, and his early letters, you have translated them, he calls him father of psychoanalysis, and he's trying to, as if, set up a conversation, set up a communication with Freud. And the good thing about Freud is that Freud does engage in a conversation. Freud is not giving in to Bose all the time, but he's talking at least. And Jones is always a problem. He's a problem all along, actually. Freud at least is talking to Bose, even if he disagrees in parts. So this is the first part. He's setting up the conversation. That's your first stage, actually. And in this conversation, a process is getting set up. Your second stage actually is interesting in the sense that Bose grows in confidence, actually. And by 1929, 1930, I have felt, actually, that Bose now is not too worried about convincing Freud. He can mark his difference with Freud, and he's quite at peace with that. Mm-hmm. In fact, I really agree with you on that ego, superego, the tripartite division. If Bose gives up one thing in Freud, he gives up a number of things. Actually, one thing in Freud, as Livio pointed out for us, is the ego, superego, tripartite division. And he writes, actually, in my paper on a new theory of mental life, I have discussed my own conception of the ego and the difficulties of accepting the tripartite division of the personality as has been suggested by Freud. So it's very, very clear on that this is what will be put to crisis by him. So this is one side. Why am I saying it's a seesaw? It's a double wish. It's a doubled up wish. In contemporary, if I may put it in Lacanese, I would have said Mobius. You move from one side to the other, and as you take the other side, you can come back to the inside. I would have actually called it a Mobius. Bose did not have that language at that time. So it's not a logic of two, it's a logic that is dynamic in the sense of the two of the seesaw, the two of the Mobius, actually, that is happening over here. However, this tension that Bose goes through all along, this movement, and he's trying to find that point in the seesaw where he can find the balance, it's again interestingly twofold, actually. On the one hand, he has to continue his conversation with Freud. On the other hand, he has to continue his conversation with India, with what will get established as India. And many are in this room, including Ashish Da, who have worked on the concept of India, Ananya, Milind, many others. But Bose is struggling, which is the third stage you are opening up. I am feeling of late, actually, this is a change a little bit in my thinking, that Bose was always perhaps troubled by both. His childhood was in Nadia, mid-Bengal, and then he went to Bhagalpur. And mid-Bengal Nadia is the space of the Sahajiyas, the Bauls, the Gauriya Vaishnavites in Bengal. So there is something from his very childhood, perhaps, that is informing him. And he has to, what you put very well, I thought, Livio, self-decolonization. In the first phase, as if he is speaking to the West, to Freud, quote unquote, to the colonizer. But he moves, interestingly, increasingly, to a self-decolonization. And the self-decolonization, and this is a conversation I was having with Milind just before this discussion, that it is premised on the idea of India. It is premised on rethinking it came up that day, rethinking culture psychoanalytically. Not take culture as transparent, but take culture as obdurate, opaque, and work through repressions, foreclosures, negations, disavowals in culture. So something you raised yesterday, actually, in the keynote, that Bose slowly, as if graduates into that moment when he can self-decolonize. He can look at culture, he can look at India and curate a very different India. Will it in turn curate a very different psychoanalysis? Is a very important question. I'll come to that. And that actually allows me to say something I shared with you, that perhaps psychoanalysis is a modern sapling in a very old soil, an old soil that housed cultivations of the self, that housed mirrors of being, that housed canvases of becoming, and an old soil that made space for this kind of introspective associations. So Bose had to do this dual thing. Quickly put, now I'll want to come back to you. One, his very first work, his PhD thesis, is a question. He is not applying repression. He is writing a book called The Concept of Repression. So he's revisiting the concept of repression. You know it, Livio. He's revisiting the concept of repression. And he's asking, why repression? How does repression happen? And the superego may not be a good theory of repression. So how would one explain repression in psychoanalysis? So there is that kind of move from the very beginning, from his very first work, which is titled The Concept of Repression. There's something, it's like the concept of the political. We are not actually discussing whether we would be political or not, whether we would use repression or not, but we are discussing the very concept of repression. And that is very...
At that time, there was no superego because...
Yes, it comes later. Comes later. Yes, 2023 around, it comes. But he has already sent the book in 21. The ego superego line comes from New Theory of Mental Life, which is later. But already he's beginning to think as a young student, literally, that what do we mean by repression? Why do we have repression in our society? So this is one, I think, angle that he manages to open up with Freud, and in that sense, while I get interested in the stages, and they are right actually, they are not wrong. Is there in Bose, and I put this in the form of a self-doubt actually, is there in Bose a constant seesaw, a double wish, a Mobius between talking to Freud and talking to India, talking to culture? Are these two happening side by side in him together? And the third stage is perhaps when he's beginning to, if I may put it in this language, he's beginning to find the balance of the seesaw, actually. And the concept of balance is very important for Bose, actually, because if one explores Bose's psychoanalytic methodology, or one may call it the clinical method, okay, what are the few departures he is positing? I feel departure one is we don't have a boy child and a girl child. We have a boy child and a girl child in medicine. Freud left medicine, Bose left medicine, Lacan left medicine. In psychoanalysis, psychoanalytically, you invoked that point, identification. The child is by default a girl child, because the child is mother identified, and the only gender the child knows is the mother's gender. And the child, and Bose uses a term actually, irradiation, IRRADIATION, radiation, irradiation, that there is as if a radiation of the mother's gender into the child. And this is one fundamental difference he has with Freud, actually. Freud starts with the boy child and the girl child, though he problematizes it in the female sexuality piece, but somewhere that keeps coming back in Freud. But Bose starts with the feminine form. And this allows Bose a way to rethink both. This is the angle I am trying to open up. It allows Bose a way to rethink the idea of India or culture and the idea of psychoanalysis. He manages to do both at the same time, because if he starts with the feminine form, something you raised as not all yesterday in Lacan, that if he can start with that, he's going to start not with the boy child, the girl child, the masculine, the feminine, the man, the woman. He's going to start with what was developed later by both Professor Kakar and Professor Nandi, the concept of the Ardhanarishwar, the concept of the seesaw of man, woman, woman, divine. So he can start from that and then work towards an understanding of the infant or the child in the seesaw of the paternal and the maternal, the masculine and the feminine. I sometimes humorously put this: human infants require psychoanalysis because they have two parents, and the two parents are of two sexes, and the infant sleeping on the double bed between father and mother is always in a seesaw, which side to turn to. And in that sense, this opens up for him the concept of the Oedipus point as against Oedipus complex, the combined parental image, and then seeing repression as the play of the seesaw. So as one side gets repressed, the other side is as if expressed, and the clinical method is then for the analyst to occupy the position of the repressed register. I'm not calling it wish, the repressed register. That the analyst occupies the position of the repressed wish or the repressed register. And this is at work in Bose continuously. So he is in the same situation with Freud. He is in the same situation with what could be called India or Indian culture. And there he has to work his way through the Trinity, the paternal Trinity that is haunting the system. Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwar. The Trinity of the three men. He works his way through that to, one could call it the Ardhanarishwar, one could call it the seesaw of the masculine and the feminine. And this gives him that method. And perhaps the decolonization in the third phase is there. Go. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You went deep inside the conceptual framework of Bose, but I prefer to stay a little bit outside and giving almost a formal lecture. And why I was starting with this idea of stages, because I have the feeling that most of time scholars they are fascinated by the relationship between Bose and Freud. They speculate about this, no? But there is no relationship somehow. There is
no such thing.
Somehow there is. How can we also? There is no relationship. There is just a kind of transference economy. Yeah. And the letters are the traces of this economy somehow. There is no relation. Never Bose imagined to visit Freud. No allusion to private life. You can find anything, any intimate element in this correspondence. Usually, correspondence are also a place in which you give something of your intimate world or your private world at least. Your family life, your nothing. In these letters, you have a kind of surface, kind of almost. Is very. So how can we? This is also a kind of methodological problem, an epistemological problem. How to read a correspondence between, so important, between the first non-Western psychoanalyst and the father of psychoanalysis. How to read this? Is it a document? Is it a theoretical source? Is it or is it a kind of a cryptid or an enigma of saying something and at the same time hiding something about the transference? And so my proposition is to not read. To not go too quickly in reading those letters as just as they are not text. They are traces of an enigmatic transference somehow on one side. So this is, if you want, a kind of a methodological or epistemological question. On the other side, I think I'd like to reverse almost your proposition. I have a materialistic reading of Bose. For me, Bose, I also I am partially inspired by Ashish Nandi work, but I take another direction finally. But for me, what was very clever and impressive in Bose was his capacity to connect psychoanalysis with conjuncture. Which conjuncture is the crisis of masculinity. During a crisis of masculinity at the end of colonial period. Almost all the cases Bose talks about are masculine cases. Sometimes patient losing their sexual capacities and everything, you know all this. Yeah. But is completely, it puts the focus on this idea that there is a crisis of masculinity. This crisis is connected with the colonial situation. Yeah. And he gives to psychoanalysis, to Indian psychoanalysis, a kind of shape, proposing a feminine tropism for making a balance with this. Yes. Of course. Somehow it doesn't want a revirilization. He's against. That's why Bose is so connected with other thinkers of the Indian decolonization. Yeah. That's why I was very sensible to the Nandi's proposition of linking Bose with Gandhi, with Tagore, about the question of how to decolonize the masculinity, the Indian masculinity. Most of thinkers of this period, they say that the solution is not a kind of virile protestation, revirilization, virile protestation, but is a kind of identification with women position. This is a way of going out, of escaping between of the relation between master and slave. We could translate this in kind of Hegelian. How to go out, how to escape to the situation to the dialectics of master and the slave. But this is the identification with the woman position. Yeah. This is a kind of philosophical skill completely shared by so many thinkers of Indian decolonization. No? What Chatterjee calls the inner world, the woman. What Bose for me is so important in the history of psychoanalysis, not just because he arrived to connect Indian culture with psychoanalysis, but because it shows that if you want that psychoanalysis become pertinent far away, you have to connect it with the very conjuncture, with the problem that is with the crisis that is immanent to the situation. You don't have to. If psychoanalysis is just a kind of conceptual landscape that you apply on a situation, it doesn't work. But if you find a point, a critical point for grafting psychoanalysis, so for me, Bose was very, very clever in making a graft. Yes. Making a graft of Freudianism on this concrete crisis, the crisis of masculinity, and that's why even if Bose is very rarely talks about politics, very rarely, his thinking, his way of practicing and transforming psychoanalysis is somehow post-colonial one, because it is linked with this idea. That's why I think that Bose is an author that we have to reevaluate in the history of psychoanalysis, because it can be very useful to think nowadays how can psychoanalysis become pertinent very far away in China, in very different situations. If psychoanalysis finds this critical point of connection in the present. This is, sorry for my precarious expression in English,
but we are getting it.
Okay, but the idea is almost there. So that's why I'm part of my work also consists in proposing Bose as a kind of, not a model, but as a kind of pattern, as a kind of scheme, as a kind of inspiring figure of this kind of graft of psychoanalysis elsewhere, far away from Western world, in this, but at this condition of finding a point, a kind of a point in the discontents of civilization in post-colonial world, in which psychoanalysis can be called and used and productive. You know, so this is why I was talking about a materialistic reading. Then the concept of opposite wish, all the conceptual construction of Bose are in a sense, are secondary to me, in the sense that are the most important thing is somehow is the gesture. But this is for opening the discussion and
no, I thank you for that, Livio, actually, and let me put it on the table, actually, and maybe this is a slight difference in the way we see things, okay, and maybe it also comes from our materialist history, maybe. See, for me, that is an important project, that we have psychoanalysis and how psychoanalysis reforms itself, readjusts itself, rethinks itself as it travels, as it moves. However, and I don't say this however with any, strong impulse. However, what remains important to maybe some of us, and I'm not alone in this perhaps, is that, and I'm remembering one moment in the exchange of letters when, if I can find it, I'll just read out. It's just 2 lines. It may help locate the problem, actually, where the problem is located. Bose had shared with Freud, you will remember this very well, it's a 1929 letter, actually, 11th of April. Bose writes to him, the real struggle lies between the desire to be a male and its opposite, the desire to be a female, and elaborates on that. We have already discussed it. You have already put it on the table. Freud responds on the 12th of May, 1929. I am fully impressed by the difference in castration reaction between Indian and European patients. Bose had offered to Freud a way to think psychoanalysis. Freud had rendered the problem empirical, that Indian and European patients are different, their castration reactions are different. Bose writes back and continues this conversation. You know it very well. But what I'm trying to place over here, Livio, and this is all placed on the table with friendship, not antagonism with the West, not at all. Okay, is that the difference is not in the Indian logic of the psyche and the German logic of the psyche only. There is a difference there. But the difference is also in the way one thinks the logic of the psyche. one thinks what is psyche, what is repression. The difference is also in the way I'm having to use that word, one models psychoanalysis. So in that sense, Bose was not simply offering to Freud a case history of Indian patients or a particular logic in which Indian analyzers function or move, but also, if I may invoke this phrase, like we say, French sociology or German mathematics, okay, a kind of an Indian understanding or an Indian logic of the psyche. Indian is, of course, in quotes, under erasure, do whatever to India we can, but let us, that's the only point I'm making, that one is to actually look from that side and see psychoanalysis travel and the universal get particularized as it moves on. So you have different versions of the universal. Okay, I actually have of late tried to suggest, albeit with trepidation, that precisely is the power of the universal. The power of the universal is in transformation, is in little cultural adjustments as it moves on. And I owe a lot to Professor Kakar, actually, on this point, that the other possibility could be that Freud is a particular, he is not an universal. Particular, he's just not an universal, he's a particular theory, a particular heuristic, a particular GPS of the psyche. And Bose is offering another heuristic, another GPS, another logic of the psyche. And these are two particulars in conversation. And the way we tend to look at, say, Ferenczi, say, Adler, Karen Horney, or Melanie Klein, or Lacan as well, okay, that who offer a particular way of understanding the psyche. Is Bose also offering a particular way of understanding the psyche, albeit emanating, and this is an interesting line by Andre Green, actually, where he says that Winnicott's psychoanalysis can be connected to British questions, Lacan's psychoanalysis can be connected to French questions. So that's why, Livia, I wanted to keep that seesaw, that double wish alive, actually, even in the stages, perhaps, as Bose moves. He's trying to actually do both, perhaps, that on the one hand reinvent India and find an India, and on the other hand reinvent psychoanalysis as a particular, not as an universal, which transforms, mutates. I think mutates is a better word, that the universal mutates as it travels. And in that sense, does Iran, does India, does Japan, does Algeria offer particulars? And the contemporary, is it, and I like your idea of friction or the moment where the two come to, come to a kind of productive or creative friction, okay, productive of creative fiction as well, perhaps. That moment is interesting because it is perhaps now offering us one possibility, is how the universal will travel and mutate. The other possibility is that the birth of an originary multiplicity of particulars. I recently read Yusuf Murad, the first Egyptian psychoanalyst. Murad translated the unconscious as unfelt feelings. Bose translated the unconscious, as nirgyan, known unknown. Okay. Now, I was really overwhelmed when I read Murad's translation. In Arabic, I'm pronouncing it wrong, definitely, la jurur. Okay, definitely my pronunciation is wrong. But one can roughly translate it as unfelt feelings, feelings that are not felt. And Bose is translating as nirgyan, not avachetan, not unconscious, nirgyan, actually. So he's bringing in the angle of known, unknown, actually. So in that sense, is the universal mutating into U1, U2, U3, U4, U5? Or is Iran, Japan, India, Algeria, Argentina offering an originary multiplicity of particulars P1, P2, P3, P4, P5, which then could create the new cosmopolitanism of psychoanalysis, that we have birthed forms and ways of looking like Oedipal, pre-Oedipal, say for example, as we move to Melanie Klein, actually. So similarly, are there such moments and moves?
Yes.
It's one way of looking at it, actually. I really want to hear you on this.
Thank you for those remarks and reflections. I think that we have to not forget that psychoanalysis began as transnational.
Yes. Yes.
Psychoanalysis was originally not linked to one culture, because psychoanalysis was born in the Austrian Empire. Austrian Empire was a cosmopolitan space, was not a nation state. So in this world, in this cosmopolitan world, like Austrian, Hungarian Empire, you have different languages. German, Slavic languages, Italian, Yiddish. You have many different languages. The first generation of psychoanalysts speak
many
different languages. Of course, there is a German tropism, of course, in Freud, but this is a very a point of strongness of psychoanalysis to be born transnational. That's why also psychoanalysis was able to change her skin. Psychoanalysis became English-speaking in the
much later.
Second half of the century. Now psychoanalysis becomes very Spanish-speaking, for example. Spanish becomes a language very important in the psychoanalytical movement. So there is this capacity of psychoanalysis to not be linked with a national culture even in the Western space is very important, and we can maybe we can also use this kind of origins for making circulate nowadays psychoanalysis. To not associate it with a national culture. I don't think it would be very useful to have a Chinese psychoanalysis or Indian psychoanalysis. No, but establishing modes of production, translation, and this is a point. Bose on this. So as you understand, I give a kind of metapolitical reading of Bose.
Of course.
Of this it's not political, not directly political.
Metapolitical.
It's not cultural. It's metapolitical, and this is why. But is I don't know what you think about, but for me it's completely surprising that we till nowadays we don't have a monographic book tracing the general landscape and movement of Bose. we miss a kind of it will be so important, I think, to have for example, I spent a lot of time in Kolkata looking for archives. It's very difficult to find letters and correspondence documents concerning Bose. Bose was extremely active from an institutional point of view. He was collaborating with so many journals, no? The Modern Review, Prabhasi. Very. How can we? How is it possible that the Bose archive almost disappeared, and we are not able today to make also an historical, critical work on the first non-Western psychoanalyst. Could be a major contribution to the nowadays to have this kind of research, to make this kind of research possible. So there is also a kind. This is very surprising and maybe a symptom of something. There is a kind of fetishization of Bose somehow, but no. Very few works about made by philological works, historical works about a man who played a very big role. So how is it? I don't know if you have. Some.
Would you say that what you were suggesting was something like provincializing psychoanalysis? And
thought comes from that.
yes, and you're resisting that by saying that it is already always transnational and cosmopolitan, if not universal and empirical.
Yes.
No, you go.
Okay.
You go first.
Provincializing psychoanalysis, why not? Is a good formula. It works. But I think we have to be careful about identity imaginary. We have to be careful about. It's not to think about just kind of national translations of psychoanalysis and with the kind of it could be much more interesting to gambling on mode of circulation, even for example between southern countries. You have it's not just a problem of north and south. Yeah. You can also be, for example, could be also interesting to work about how you can have creative circulation of psychoanalysis between different southern cultures.
Through a common project of decolonization.
Yes, Octave Mannoni wrote at the end of almost at his last paper on this question is published in '75. He wrote a paper named "The Decolonization of the Humankind."
Who is this?
Manon.
So he started with the colonization. It's very interesting because in Mannoni he started with the problem of decolonization of the colonized. Then he moved in '66 and on the problem of the decolonization of the colonizer. And then at the end of his life, he said the decolonization of the humankind, of everybody. This is quite astonishing, very, very. This kind of in the post-colonial world somehow the problem of the decolonization concerns everybody, every in different positions, in different ways, but somehow the post-colonial is universal somehow. But my answer would big. No, we have to be. it could be a pity to nationalize psychoanalysis
Yeah.
because she born transnational, and she is transnational till now.
Yeah.
So how to invest this tradition, this on a large scale and
Yeah.
outside the borders of where psychoanalysis is well present in the South. This is maybe.
Can I respond? Huh? I actually agree with Livio on that transnational angle he brought. I think you brought balance again. Otherwise, we get tilted to one side too much, actually, trying to, make the particulars surface. So that's why I wanted you to speak first, because I really agree with you on that, that it is not that there is a West and an East, or we have to think ourselves in terms of nation states. Nation states are only recent ways of conceptualizing ourselves. Hence, civilizational angles have been also invoked from time to time. But civilizations are also crossroads. So there are crossroads and crossroads within psychoanalysis. So even when Freudian psychoanalysis, if it can be called Freudian, is being born, we have Jung, we have Adler, we have Ferenczi, we have Karen Horney, we have Otto Rank. Okay, we have so many actually positing particulars within that. So we cannot give up the West. We have to have a creative, cosmopolitan multiplicity in our relationship with the West. But what I wanted to also put on the table over here is that we cannot also accept or reject, as Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya says, that we cannot lapse into reactive particularisms. So we cannot accept or reject unthinkingly India, Iran, Japan, or Algeria, or Argentina. There also we need a critical relationship with that particular that is being born. Now, Livio, we don't have the time to get into it. We can think a very Vedantic psychoanalysis from India. We can think a psychoanalysis that is not Vedantic, actually, and which one was Bose is to be discussed some other day. But there is a possibility of a very different psychoanalysis curated from, say, the spiritual tradition. The spiritual kept a little separated from quote-unquote religion. So in different ways one can curate a kind of particular from here. And in that sense, I don't want to make it a West-East national or merely a civilizational problem also. That there are multiple particulars and there is an originary multiplicity over here. And how do we continue to talk or engage? And there I thought Livio's phrase, creative friction, which also creates creative fictions actually, has this, so that is very, very important, that conversation opens up. Now, why do we have to talk of Bose? I'm just remembering one line. It would be nice to read it actually, if I can find it. It's by Derrida actually. Short few lines from him. And now I won't find it surely. All that is left to us by tradition is mere words. Words have to be unskinned. It is up to us to find out what they mean. May the loser win once. So in that sense, one can read Bose, write Bose. And I agree with you, Livio, that those works need to be brought together and kept in the archive of psychoanalysis. Right.
So listening to you, I had the idea, and I just want to put it out. I'm not convinced of it, but I began to wonder about whether or not we have a parallel process going here. I mean, you're all familiar with the idea of a parallel process. There's a process between Bose and Freud, and then there's a process between the two of you. And in certain ways, it seems parallel to me. That Bose would take much more your position on it in the way that you're thinking about it. And Freud would have, this is where it's not so flattering, but I mean, it would have a much farther reaching and all-inclusive take on exactly what's happening. And I think it's for that reason, and you don't do this, but it's perhaps for that reason that Freud was so, he just disregarded Bose's work. There's really not any evidence, is there? Let me put it as a question. Was there a real interaction between the two of them? Did they get down into the meat of the ideas?
Yeah.
Was there much of a discussion of what Bose had to say?
I would say yes, actually.
Did Freud
I would say yes. Freud really engaged with
Well,
Bose.
you're a really nice guy, though. And I'm just wondering if can you give me an example, of a way in which Freud engaged Bose's thinking in some depth?
There is in the correspondence, there is the very primal form of the discussion about the specificity of Oedipus complex in India. This is the point that that Bose exposes to Freud, and Freud is listening to. And there is another crucial point in which, for example, there is a discussion about dualism.
Yeah.
And Freud says that the theory of Bose is too formal and lacks of a third term.
Third dimension.
Third dimension.
Yeah.
So he's suggesting, so he's making reference to the superego question. So there is you have at least two moments in the correspondence where a kind of a real confrontation is engaged.
Right.
Okay, it remains just suggested and is not developed completely, but it's there. And this is the first.
Yeah.
And in my, if I'm not wrong, is the first time in which it's the first time in which in the history of psychoanalysis in which you have a confrontation on Oedipus version
On the core principle.
Yes. Because before Malinowski, before and everything. So it's a very important point.
Yeah.
That is a very important trace from from a very important document. So it's not. When I say that this correspondence is somehow is not. Maybe there is no relationship between Bose and Freud.
Yeah, that was said in a different way, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
But no.
There is a relation.
And of course, yes, we have not to forget that at that time, Freud was considering India as India, but at the same time as a part of British Empire. And so, in the fact, there was a strong mediation of the British society. So, in a way, but so, and Bose, in a way, there was a kind of triangulation, and between Jones, Freud, and Bose. It's not just a dual.
No.
There was a third dimension.
Amrita, let me read out one line from Freud's letter to Bose, 1933, 1st of Jan, only to support Livio's point, actually. which is why we can't take a hard position, Dan, actually. Like, I want to keep it ambivalent, actually, keep the seesaw alive, actually. Freud is writing to Bose, we did neglect the fact of the existence of opposite wishes from the three sources of A, bisexuality, male and female, ambivalence, love, hate, and the opposition of active, passive. Passive. Active, passive. Passive.
What was the date on that? What was the date on that?
1st of Jan 1933.
The correspondence began
In
21.
1921.
Right.
Now the next line is very important, actually. These phenomena have to be worked into our system to make us see what modifications or corrections are necessary and how far we can build on your ideas. So Freud is also trying to move over
Masculine,
here.
feminine, active, passive, and
Love, hate. Love, hate. And Lal Kalu is the work on this, actually, the children's novel, it's a political. Amrita, go ahead.
Time between coffee and commenting.
Yeah, please choose your coffee and tea before it's getting cold.
Yes.
Let's give it.
With sugar. There are 2 cups of coffee. There's more that will come, but there's tea here and sugar, so please help.
Just pass it.
I couldn't help recalling it when we were talking about the transnational, but also remembering Livio yesterday saying transcultural. And I guess the question that I'm formulating, which of course doesn't really have an answer, is if psychoanalysis is transnational, then what is its culture? And how do the multiplicities of culture play into that?
Yes, you are right. I try to give a
Tough question.
You are.
I'm not sure it has an answer, but
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
No, just
We can
some,
think
some
about it.
association.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
on your.
yeah.
You are right to international and transnational is not exactly the same, isn't it? I was taking this idea of a transnationality, or original transnationalism of psychoanalysis from 2 scholars, maybe you know, an Argentinian historian, Mariano Plotkin, and Joy Damussis from Australia. They wrote a very important book. They edited a very important book named Transnational Unconsciousness.
I didn't know of it. I haven't read it.
Is in the introductory text of this collective book, they engage with this idea of there is something in the history of psychoanalysis making the cultural reference of psychoanalysis quite floating, because the first generations of psychoanalysts belonging to the Jewish Eastern world. Most of them, they came from the eastern part of Austrian Empire. Most of them, they came from what is actually Ukraine. Bukovina, Moravia, Galicia, smaller. They came from the margins of this world, and they were assimilated to the German culture, but they were Osternjuden, what means Jewish coming from the
Freud's father.
yes, like family,
Marginalized.
Freud's family.
Yeah.
So even their relation with the German culture was somehow a new one, a new relation, was not completely rooted. Was this idea that psychoanalysis somehow adopts a culture, a language, but doesn't feeling at home, never. This is That's why someone like Georges Devereux used to say that to be a psychoanalyst you have to be exile, in exile.
Nomadic.
No, in
exile.
In exile. Exile, in exile. The best situation for psychoanalysis is exile.
The best situation for psychoanalysis is exile.
Is the exiled psychoanalyst.
Yeah. That's a good one, actually.
Like Devereux. Somehow, but so many, there is a strong relationship between exile and psychoanalysis in the history of psychoanalytical movement. Yeah. How can we today? How can we produce a kind of exile work? Also, and not even if we. This is is not an answer to your question, but is a try to make it work. This is why is not the solution will not be to work to an identification of his own culture, even if his culture is a minor one. No. And the last consideration, yes, we can have when some. For example, I think we can imagine, like in South America, some connection between, I don't know, for example, what happens if an Indian psychoanalyst or scholar gets interested in Chinese psychoanalysis, and what happens there also, how they make, for me, this kind of also, do not be just in captured in confrontation between South and North, but also making some looking different references and gaps inside the Asiatic world, for example, inside the South, to make a kind of this kind of to move the landscape, but not just in a perpetual confrontation between North and South. It was, I end with the last consideration, it was so important for Fanon, for Frantz Fanon, it was completely crucial. Frantz Fanon used Algeria, somehow, to escape from the confrontation between black people from French West Indies and France, between white and black. He introduced a third dimension. Algeria was the third dimension, also very precious because in white mask, black skin, you have also this confrontation, this master slave. But then, after with the second book of Fanon and the second part of his work and life, he somehow, as Albert Memmi says, Algeria was so important to deconstruct this binarism and this confrontation. So we have to, we have to also to look to bet on this possibility of looking for a third place.
Amrita, just building on this, actually, I'll build on the exile, actually. An analyst, and I'm invoking the title of Ashish Da's book, Exiled at Home.
Yes.
And how to remain exiled at home, and home could be civilization, home could be nation, home could be culture, home could be identity. And in that sense, how to remain.
Home could also be, if I may interject,
Yes.
the place where the mother is there.
Yeah, also.
Primal mother.
The primal mother, the place where the mother is there. Yes. So,
The well-known episode of attempting to murder the writer.
Rushdie.
Huh?
Rushdie.
Huh?
Salman Rushdie.
So that came from the fact that nobody inquired why was this so important, because Prophet Muhammad had himself included it in the Quran, and it was sacred, but then he felt that it has to be disowned, and there is this underlying suspicion which dies that this came primarily because both the two goddesses had come from India. So the primal mother allows you to play with the way you can handle this gender issue.
So in that sense, one can build on that also, actually. So how to?
Yes, it's biblical.
Yeah.
It's like queen bees in nature, and so many things. Elephants, which are elephants led by women.
So, Amrita, just to end it.
This is primitive.
So is Judaism.
Primal.
Yeah.
This primal structure of getting broken with more habitation and so on and so forth in the first few centuries of the first century and the first millennium. One can put it that way. That's the time when the Puranic novels,
Goddesses, I think.
Puranic texts began to be first come into existence.
On that note, I'm afraid we will have to wind up because we are already way over time. It was so engaging, inspiring. Thank you very much. And I think this discussion and debate has to continue outside the seminar room. So let us shift to our next round.